everybody, it is Tom Breeks here, and also I have with me
Ollie Wilson. How's everybody doing?
Hopefully everyone's doing very well. And did you have a good New Year and good Christmas, Ollie?
It was fantastic. Yes,
Good.
it was fantastic.
Good to hear.
It was interesting. I'll tell you what was interesting was that there was some clients of ours, some of our agency clients, who probably within 2 weeks of the Christmas period decided that they wanted to run some holiday campaigns, which is fantastic. And it just so happens they said, yeah, great. So we've got all these great ideas and we want you to go and, put them in motion. Let's make it happen. So we had several people running webinars between Christmas and New Year.
Nice.
And we had some people that were running Boxing Day promotions. It was all very, very interesting and so quite chaotic.
Do you tend to find that conversions are higher or lower over Christmas, just generally across most clients?
Well, what was really, really interesting, especially on the webinar ones, which I guess will give an indication of kind of consumption as well of, people that are actually showing up, not just registering for things.
Yeah.
The webinar was on the 29th of December and the show up rate was 55%. Or a little shade over, right? And
that's higher than usual, right?
Oh yeah, that's higher than usual. And so
what numbers do you normally expect to get on show-up rates?
I would say 40% would be an average. There or thereabouts. Depends on if the relationship that you've got with your list, if they've been on webinars before, what the general kind of hook is of the webinar and stuff. That's all quite interesting and important.
I suppose the time from registration to actually webinar running as well would be another factor.
It is, yeah. And in this case, we started promoting it actually on the 26th, which was Boxing Day, for a webinar on the 29th. So, I think 4 days is that out. So that meant that we kind of got the opportunity to send one email invitation, one the next day, we sent one every day, and two on the final day if they still hadn't registered.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Good results?
It was exceptional.
Nice.
It was exceptional. It was approximately an $1,800 product that was being sold, a training course.
It's a high end.
Yeah. And so we had rough numbers were that we had about 900 people that registered. In that case, I think it was like 490 actually who actually got on the webinar initially. They got on, but obviously we don't really count everybody that just gets on. We want to know that they stayed for a certain period, but that's a whole different conversation. But
about a session versus a visit.
Yeah, sure. So they actually they got onto the webinar. Now I asked our client, what would you expect to sell on the back of this? And they said, well, because of the price point, realistically, we'd love a good result would to come away with like 12.
Okay.
So I thought,
good pace for Christmas.
Yeah, I thought, maybe the conversion, if you got, say, 400 people or so into this, we kind of reverse engineer it back to see if it's realistic once we sent a few emails, like, what's it going to look like? And, and I think they ended up with a bit of follow-up on the evening of the 29th, and then a hard deadline, which was on New Year's Eve. They ended up with 29 sales.
Nice.
So that was great.
But what's that, 29 out of about 490? I'm just doing some.
Well, technically...
That's nice. At that price point, that's 6% or so. People
buy. It was actually higher than that, because only 300 and... it was, I can't remember the exact number, but it was high 380s that actually saw the offer. So actually the actual conversion is actually higher than that.
So 19 out of 360, you say? 380?
Ish. Yeah. Yes.
Let's go 370, somewhere in the middle there. Yeah. Nice.
So pretty good numbers. So we overachieved it. I don't know if you just said 19, 29.
Yeah, so I just put it back in. Yeah, so it's 29, so 8.1%.
Yeah, and
pretty healthy numbers.
It was pretty crazy. And I didn't envisage talking about this, but it's an interesting conversation.
Precisely.
I'll tell you what is really interesting in a takeaway. I think you always learn things. I mean, we just do so many promotions sometimes. We don't always do a retrospective on stuff sometimes to really dissect what really worked, which is actually a really sensible thing to do. And
yes.
Now we're
not just bask in the glory of the money that's come in. Actually look at it and think, how do we improve this damn thing?
Yeah, certainly. So a learning point for me, a takeaway, and probably some people who are listening to this thinking that, I run webinars and that's a really good result. And by me, you must have had quite a lot of people that were, you were promoting to. One of the big things that we got that made a big difference to us was one-click registrations for webinars. So we used Webinar Jam as the actual technology, and it was a live webinar. It wasn't an automated webinar. And we did a one-click registration, which meant there was a button that we put actually in the email that had said, register with one click. And what we did was all of the images that are in the email, including the header and even a bio photo that we put in there, we had as the link to click to register. Now, that's a little bit shady in a way, because if they're clicking the link to register, they're actually registering versus, any link that's on there, but they're clicking around. And it meant that we knew that we'd probably get with a one click, when we've ran this before, you always get a lot more people who register. But that then can sometimes have an issue in terms of then follow-up. But it does give you and afford you the opportunity to, because those people have opened and they've clicked and they've registered essentially, one way or another, to actually do the bit of teaching before the webinar that gets them even more interested and excited about attending. So then that increases the show up and obviously increases the number of sales at the end of the day.
Very interesting. So, because we're on this topic now, I think we should because I've got other questions about webinars as well in just a second for you. So I think it would be a good idea to talk about webinars and go into a bit more detail about this. In terms of what you see working from webinars, and say okay, here's something that people aren't really doing with webinars that we see work really well. I've also got questions around timing of webinars as well. How long, everyone always asks me how long should a video ad be? And my answer is always make it a good video. Don't worry about the length of it. Normally try and make it 2 or 3 minutes if you can, but if it goes on longer, great. Don't worry about it. Get content out there. I don't know if that's the same advice for webinars and things. But I know that you focus on this stuff quite a bit. You've done a lot of promotions, done very successful campaigns for clients. If, say, for example, I was to run a webinar, what would you say would be okay, here's how to know that you're choosing the right topic, or here's what advice would you have basically on running the best webinar you could?
Sure. I think the way that I start with a webinar is actually with the order form.
Okay.
So I always start with what are we selling and what's the offer? What's the thing that we're actually going to sell to these people?
So you've spoken about before, the milestone is get the sale. That's the
finish point. Yeah. That's
where we work backwards from there and make sure that you have everything in place to support that process.
Yeah. So, in terms of, looking at different offers and thinking about what bonuses we might be including. In some cases, there can be 2 tiers to that. It might be a case that there's some fast action bonuses if they take those offers that evening, and they may expire then, so that the post-webinar follow-up doesn't provide those offers, so it's actually going to a different order form. Can be a little bit more of a sophisticated strategy, but in the main, I'm always looking at what are we selling, what's the offer, and what's the value that we're giving there.
Yeah. And so then you tend to put deadlines on there to put that scarcity in place and kind of generate. I've always found that put scarcity to any offer tends to massively increase conversion rates, especially just before the time kind of closes, so to speak. Okay, cool. So there's scarcity. Make sure that's in there in some way, shape, or form. Okay, cool. Sorry.
And make sure it's irresistible. I mean, people don't, really think about, for us, when people talk about direct response marketing, and they talk to me in general, and this isn't just about webinars, it's about anything, and they'll be hankering on about the sales copy. And there's only really three parts to direct response. There's the list it's been sent to, the copy, and the offer. That's the three things. And everybody goes towards copy. The better copy we have, the better it's going to convert. In actual fact, 60% of the success of any campaign is always going to be down to the audience, down to the actual list.
Okay, so quality of the list and making sure that you've got a good connection with them as well.
Sure. And about 30% is going to be the actual offer, the thing that you're actually enticing them with. And then only 10% is really going to be the copy. And so, if you've got the right audience, then, with the right offer, then you are going to make some sales. And so, the way that you structure your presentation, and yes, there's some proven formulas to be able to do that. Things like, in the webinar, you probably, in your content piece, about 70%, 65% of the webinar is going to be teaching them something to, really open the, pull back the curtain and show them behind the scenes of how they can overcome certain problems, challenges, and how you can actually help them, how working with you can help them. But
so it's always a demonstration value and
authority as well. In terms of teaching, you are solidifying your authority. And most people try and teach too much. They try and go into too much content, too much detail, because they think that the more that I give, the more that I'll get back. And what you've got to be careful of is the fact that you really don't want to be over delivering with content. Really, what you do deliver needs to definitely be impactful. But having said that, you probably want to be limiting your teaching segment to probably 3 to 5 part maximum. So 3 secrets that you go into that's going to be revealed, 3 parts to it. And I think just keeping to that kind of framework just makes it easy for you to think, okay, at the beginning of my presentation, it's all about establishing my authority, establishing my expert status and credibility, where I've come from, affinity, so that, you understand who you're talking to, that, you're hopefully resonating with them, and that's the reason why they're on the call, and that you've done a lot of good things, but you've also done a lot of bad things, and you've learned from those lessons, and then segueing into, here, I'm going to share with you 3 things, and this is what they are. And we're going to go step by step, and I'm going to take you through each. And then you move then from that teaching segment towards, now, if you'd like to work with me personally and help you implement this, then that's great. I'm sure what I've talked to you about tonight is very important, and you can see that, and you can go away and hopefully implement it. And some people on the call, they'll definitely want to do that. But if you want to go further, if you want to go deeper, if you want to work with me personally, then we can do something else. And I've got good news for you, because tonight you get the opportunity to, for me to unveil how we can do that. And so, you can tell I've probably done that a few times, right? So,
you go through it quickly.
Sure. So, but it's the same as you when you talk about videos, then it sort of just naturally rolls off your tongue. I'm like in awe of that.
Well, do you know what I think is really interesting about it is, like, the structure you just mentioned there is very similar to the structure that we put together in a video.
All right,
do a much more concise version of it, I suppose.
Sure.
So we're still giving away the 3 good pieces of content. We're still making sure we establish the authority and the credibility and start the video. And we try and wrap it up in some way or shape or form, like a case study, for example. Like, hey, look, here's how we managed to achieve this result. Here's what it's allowed us to do, and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
But it is always about, like, demonstrating value, actually giving value to the person that's listening in, and then telling them how they can take the next step. So it's a similar process. I mean, the video ad is doing the sales process of saying, take the next step. And I suppose the webinar is doing exactly the same thing again, of saying, here's more great content. We've unpacked a little bit more, but hey, look, what I've got for you is much bigger than that. And it's going to solve all the rest of your problems that you've got. And maybe some of the problems you didn't realize you have right now. Open their eyes a little bit further, and you have a package there. So in terms of identifying whether you have a good, on that webinar you're talking about previously, you're selling at $1,800, right?
Yes.
So that for me feels like it would be a higher ticket item than usual.
For sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
But that's great. I love that. I love pushing the boundaries. But like, what would that offer consist of typically? Like when you're going in at that level, what would it be like? Are you starting to give away some coaching time? Is that kind of the idea? Is it a long-term program? What is it that, I can't imagine it may be. Is it just like one product?
Yeah.
Or what is it?
It's really just like everything. It's the value of what the transformation that they're going to get as a result of attending that training. So this gives them the opportunity to really add an additional income stream to what they're already doing. They're established. And in fact, to be fair, the audience, it's about knowing your audience, are predisposed and partially pre-educated to buying. And specifically buying this thing. And so to actually go from that to a high ticket item like that was very possible because of the relationship and the market in the background. And that's very possible. Most of the time, though, you're totally right. You would usually be doing some kind of two-step sale, not usually, but it can be the case. You can do an application. We do that when we sell business opportunities, where we are essentially getting somebody to apply. Now, that could be a free application, meaning they're scheduling a call and filling an application in with somebody, or it can be a paid application, like we do in one of my businesses, which is a £500 refundable deposit. And so that's what we do on that particular type of webinar as well. So, there's lots of ways to structure those things. But the absolute key, I think, is that there are lots of things with webinars that you can do, a lot of things that you can do. I think it's quite modular. And I think what we should probably do is like in another episode is actually break down each one of those modules and go a lot deeper, because there's certainly some things that we could talk about from the advertising perspective of that's quite interesting, because I'm still seeing a lot of people with cold traffic actually driving to webinars right now. That's interesting. What sort of webinar should you offer? Should it be a just-in-time webinar? Should it be scheduled how far out? Should it be evergreen? Should it be live? We can really get into that. But I think the thing is that I often get asked, and just to kind of nullify any thoughts about this, do webinars still work? Are people still doing webinars? And they absolutely are, and they are absolutely working right now. But just
they weren't as easy as before, because the people, all the spammy people, are trying to do it and not getting great results, right?
And
that's
people
so true. It's like exactly like Google AdWords. Like say, oh no, it doesn't work at all. It's like it does work. You've got to have a good product and a good sales process, and it does work for you. It's market will decide where the level is, and if you hear people saying, oh, this new sales approach doesn't work, it's like, no, it doesn't work for you probably.
Right. And it's not, it's always the case of it's not what you do, it's the way you do it. And who you do it with and who you do it to, right?
Yeah.
So it is really, it's a really interesting topic. And I think, I think it'd be a good opportunity for people probably listening that, talking about this now and talking it out as in our usual casual way, that we should definitely go into that deeper. And that's something we should definitely do in a part 2 of this episode for sure.
Done. All right. Okay, Ollie, I know you need to go as well to get on a phone call. But listeners, I hope you found that very useful. And we're going to do part 2 and go into a lot more deep dive into webinars and getting the very best results from them. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.